Jim McBride here again. Going to jump right into part two of episode 11. Part one, the link to part one will be in the description at the bottom, as well as the link to part three. So in part one, we talked about what our local government organization is, who are our representatives at the city, county, and state, and who owns our roads, which is going to be eye-opening for a lot of folks. And now I'm getting into part two. So now we know who everything from part one. Now we're going to talk about why has development and population growth outpaced the infrastructure that we need to support it? There's going to be a lot of data that will be interesting to a lot of folks. And a quick disclaimer, I will jump around a lot between city data, city and county data, or incorporated and unincorporated data, uh, Johns Island specific data, and then Johns Island and James Island data, and sometimes all the Sea Islands together without James Island. Mostly because the sources of data that I'm using and going to show you all are from a lot of different sources that are organized differently, but also because each of those categories matters in different ways. But there was no one consistent way to show all the data. Because again, City District 3 is just 20% of Johns Island. The unincorporated part is 80%. But the concentration of growth, of course, is in the city portion, the 20%. And then part of District 3 goes on to James Island, but only part of James Island. So, and all of the Sea Islands, growth and traffic impacts our portion, the city portion of Johns Island. So it's a lot of data. I'm going to jump around. So just hang with me here and just kind of pause it, take screenshots, whatever the data that you need to use. So let me move my picture out of the way here. So this is Johns and James Island population data, city only. This is city data. So the District 3 portion of Johns Island and all of James Island, even though my district's not all of James Island, but just for context. So as you can see, this is census data on the top. Census data. So census is done every 10 years. So 2010, 2020, James Island increased around 5,000 people, and Johns Island increased around 6,000 people, which more than doubles the Johns Island population in that 10 years. Okay, so now this is population estimates for 2023, 2024, 2025. Even though 2023 and 2024 are behind us, this is still estimates based on City of Charleston building permit data because we don't really know the population until the next census comes around, where they do an official count of people. So it's still estimates. So James Island, as you can see there, it's not grown a whole lot in the last three years. Just a few hundred total, from 21,865 in 2023 to 22,000 in 2025. Johns Island has increased a bit more. It's been pretty consistent growth. So 2023 to 2024 grew 700 people estimated, and then 24 to 25 grew 600 people estimated. And it'll make sense in a little bit why that is. Okay, here's Sea Island, all the Sea Islands census data. Again, cities plus county, incorporated, unincorporated. When I say Sea Islands, I mean Johns Island, Wadmalaw, Kiowa, and Seabrook together. Okay, census data. 1990, all the Sea Islands, 12,900. The year 2000 went up 18% to 15,000. In 2010, went up 28%, so starting to accelerate to 19,500. 2020, 53% increase to almost 30,000. And of that 2020 census data for all the Sea Islands, the Johns Island share is 70%, 76% of that or 22,854. Okay, so Johns Island residential building permits, because people don't move here without buildings to live in, obviously. So here's the building permits, and we'll start to see a correlation between building permits and population growth. And I have a graph that shows that overlaid on top of on top of each other here in a moment. So this is 2015 to 2023. I'm just going to camp on this for a minute because it's pretty interesting data. I'll look at James Island first. You can see a lot of growth in the 2016 to 2018 timeframe. 2018 had 549 permits. And then all of a sudden it went off a cliff as far as the number. It went down to 91 and then kind of a trickle every year since then. 2023 had 31 only on James Island. And I think it's just because it's running out of space. There's not as many places to grow anymore in James Island. West Ashley had a huge explosion in 2022, a little bit less in 2023. Peninsula, a lot of growth in Peninsula, except for 2023, went down a lot. Cainhoy up north of the city, the downtown Charleston, north of that, 972 in 2023. So that's a huge increase there. Johns Island, relatively steady from 2015 to 2023, and I'll show you 2024 in a second, ranging from mid 300s to at the most mid 500s every single year. I'm gonna zoom in here and I'm gonna add 2024. I got new data. So that's everybody 2023, 2024. Johns Island again, 362, 2023, went down in 2024 to 193. So a little bit of decrease. James Island, pretty steady. So just interesting information to kind of see the trends there on all the parts of Charleston. All right, so this is the graph I was talking about, overlaying population census data on top of the permit data. This is all the Sea Islands again combined. Johns Island, Wadmalaw, Kiowa, Seabrook. Population and housing unit growth. A picture out of the way. So the Johns Island portion of all the Sea Islands is the smaller thin lines here. And again, that's city and county, incorporated, unincorporated. You can see the population growth. That's from the census data that I showed you earlier, 1990, 2000, 2010, 2020. There's the percentage increase in between each 10-year period. So you can see that acceleration, especially in the 2010, started accelerating. And there's the units. Kind of confusing here because the data wasn't including prior to 2010, Kiowa and Seabrook data were combined with Johns and James Island. So that's why it drops down. So this is, again, the thick line is all the Sea Islands, and this is just the Johns Island portion here. So really the accurate data is from here on. So you can see Johns Island's growth obviously heavily influences the rest of the Sea Islands growth, just because we have the biggest area that's growing on both the permits and the population. This projection is just kind of based on trends and kind of looking at how much land is still available to grow and that's still to be permitted. So I'll just let you kind of look at this for a minute. All right, so now with all that growth, that steady growth that we've seen, how does that impact prices? So as we know, it's become very expensive to rent and buy anywhere in Charleston, as it's the #1 city every single year, it seems like, for a long time, to move to and to visit. But for moving here, a lot of people are moving here. Obviously, the prices have gone up a lot. This is a slide of historical median sales price. This is Johns Island only city and county combined, single family detached homes. So you can see from 2014 to about 2021, very consistent, steady rise. And then all of a sudden, 2021 to 2023, a huge, huge jump. We're talking $220,000 jump or 58% just in 2 years, starting in 2023. And then it leveled off a little bit and it's starting to climb again. So right now, 2025, we're talking at least $650,000 for the median sales price for a single family detached home on Johns Island. That is astronomical, especially from just less than 5 years ago. It was way down to less than $400,000. So that's reflective of what's happening all over Charleston, Mount Pleasant, North Charleston, you name it. Um, Kiowa Seabrook, the prices are going up across the board. That reflects, just going off of Economics 101, the demand. So even though the supply of homes has gone up, as you saw, all the different areas of Charleston, the demand has far exceeded the supply, because if the demand was lower, the prices would come down. And if the supply was higher to meet the demand, the prices would be less. Um, and frankly, we can't afford the supply to go up rapidly because our infrastructure is not keeping up, and that's another topic I'll get to later. But this impacts all income levels of all across Charleston, and all housing income levels, from low income housing to high income housing. This average or median price, sales price, and there's same data for rentals and that kind of stuff. It's really high, and it's spiked. That's impacting the cost of living across the board at all income levels. So that makes it really hard for firefighters, police officers, teachers, entry level, restaurant workers, just any entry level job, entry level city employees. Makes it really, really hard for them to move to Johns Island or anywhere in Charleston and live anywhere close to where they're working. And that adds to traffic because they got to drive a long ways to get to work. Um, some people do live on Johns Island and have a job up in North Charleston or downtown Charleston. Uh, hope I'm assumingly a higher income job that they can afford, maybe with a dual income family or working two jobs or whatever it is. They can afford a home on Johns Island, but they can't afford a job, maybe in downtown Charleston or whatever it is. So it adds to traffic when there's not enough business opportunities in the local area where you live, and it forces people to have to get a job but have to live a long ways away. So it also increases the number of homelessness, or tends to increase the number of homelessness in an area. So if the cost of renting and buying a home is impacted at all levels, then at the lower levels, there's people that can normally just barely afford low income housing, can no longer afford it because that cost of even the low income housing can go up. So, and that's exactly what's happened. So again, this is just Johns Island. I'm going to show you a homeless situation for all of Charleston in a minute, but it spiked in 2021. I think it spiked pretty much everywhere in Charleston. And here's the impact. Charleston's homeless increase has increased a lot, and it spiked in 2020, started to spike in 2021. So you have a gap in shelter beds of 150 as of 2023, and I think that's steadily climbed till today. Annual PIT count, PIT count just means the count of sheltered and unsheltered individuals and families experiencing homelessness on a single average night. So this high demand in housing is impacting us in a lot of areas. It's not just traffic. It impacts us in a lot of hurts. It can hurt the economy because you can't get workers to move here, et cetera. Um, so let's focus on infrastructure. The impact to the rapid growth in Johns Island and District 3, James Island. but mostly Johns Island, how it impacts traffic in the whole area or infrastructure. First, I'm going to start with roads and traffic. I'm going to just use this as an illustration of a traffic study that a friend of mine, Andrew Turek, engineer, private citizen, did this on his own time using Google data. It's not data provided by the city of Charleston. Just want to make that disclaimer. This data is provided by a private volunteer and not the city of Charleston. So I'm going to focus on the Maybank River intersection, and we have data for all over Johns Island and West Ashley and James Island, but I'm going to focus on the Maybank River intersection because thankfully Main Road Segment A up in Main and River and Main and 17 area has started, and that'll be done sometime in 2028. So at least that's getting addressed. But the Main or Maybank and River area, there's plans to improve it, but there's no funding for it. And again, go back to part one of my videos to understand who owns what roads and all the funding situation there. It'll make more sense. But I'm going to focus on this intersection, and we're working with the county and the state to try to get funding faster to get this rolling. But just want to show you, this is just from the library, Johns Island Library on Maybank, going to the Stone River Bridge. It's about a little over 3 mile distance. Takes 7 minutes on average, at midnight with no traffic. And at rush hour, starting at just at 6 a.m., starts to go up and it peaks at 7:30 a.m. And rush hour lasts until about 9 a.m. The time to travel that distance goes from 7 minutes to 19 minutes on average on workday days, on average work days. The dark blue line, just if you want to know, is just during this period here, September to October. And the light blue line, it was before that, so during the summer break, just to kind of show you what the traffic looks like between summer break and when school's in session. And then this line here is coming west from James Island to Johns Island on Maybank. You can see a little bit of a bump there during evening rush hour, but it's not nearly as bad as morning rush hour. And of course, that's because we have the one lane on Maybank narrows down to one lane. You got to get that second lane built, and we're working on it, trying to get the funding for it to alleviate that pressure right there. Same intersection coming from Brownswood Road down river to Maybank, and then taking a left and going towards the Stone River Bridge. About the same distance, about 7 minutes at midnight to travel that. Similar impact at rush hour, same rush hour period. Peaks at about 19 minutes, from 7 minutes to 19 minutes. And then coming back from James Island, a little bit of a bump in the evening rush hour time, but not nearly as bad coming back. And here it is coming from the south, down by the airport, again to the bridge, about 7 minutes, 6 to 7 minutes during midnight, and it peaks at about 16 minutes. So not as bad of an impact on the way out. It's a little bit worse in the evening. The evening rush hour bump is a little bit worse. So just showing you that we're tracking, trying to find innovative ways to figure out how much traffic is impacted. And of course, that impact and that small stretch of space on Maybank, you add that to the delay on James Island, and you add the delay, in West Ashley or the peninsula downtown, or if you're going to North Charleston, you add delay after delay after delay, and it leads to people driving over an hour to get to work around this area, and it's extremely frustrating. And we've got to do our part to improve the traffic, the roads where we can in our area, and the other districts' representatives are doing the same thing in the rest of Charleston. So just showing you we're tracking it, I'm aware of it, and just showing that the traffic impact to the population growth. And I'll keep tracking this, and I'll be able to compare, month after month, year after year, the next school year, when the new Johns Island Elementary School opens on Upper River Road, I'll be able to show within a couple weeks how much traffic is impacted because that school opens, things like that. And with that information, I can use that to share with the state and the county to hopefully make some changes faster, get some money faster. So that's just roads. Now there's other parts of infrastructure, such as fire stations, parks. So I'm just going to focus on fire stations and parks right now. So you look at this map, and this is a map of all the fire stations in the city of Charleston and some in the county. So the white circles with the red F are um, county, or like St. John's Fire or St. Andrew's Fire, um, that cover the county areas and the unincorporated areas. But look at these fire stations. That seems to be kind of pretty well covered. And then you look at Johns Island, and there's a huge gap right there. Look at that. And up into western West Ashley. And I don't understand how a municipality plans its growth and doesn't ensure that other parts of infrastructure are not in place while the growth is happening to anticipate the growth. I will say the good news is there is a new fire station being built right there on Maybank City Fire Station. Should be done by July of 2026. And I will also say that even though the physical coverage of actual fire stations is not where it should be, the city is aware of it, and they're investing obviously here, and they're looking at trying to get more fire stations in other parts of Upper and Lower River Road. And I'll also say that despite this lack of physical coverage, we have been thankfully covered well by the teamwork of the city fire department and St. John's Fire. You see these F's there, current station on Maybank for St. John's Fire. There's one on Main, St. John's Fire, and one up here in West Ashley. And of course, the ones on James Island, West Ashley, covered down on Johns Island when needed. So they're a great team. They work together. They work seamlessly, and they've protected us and kept us safe. And I'm extremely grateful for that. But we need more stations, and thankfully, one is getting built, and more will be built, hopefully in the next few years. But just showing you about population growth and not having the infrastructure in place to support it is frustrating. Now I'm going to get into parks. Parks may seem like less of a deal, but it matters to parents, it matters to kids. It matters to sometimes elderly that want to use certain park facilities. And we got, as you can see there, it's pretty obvious, but I'll put a red box around it. Very few park spaces on Johns Island. This here on the bottom left corner is a city park that we have with some baseball fields and tennis courts and a few amenities, frisbee golf. And then that's Angel Oak Park, which is really small, but that's getting larger here soon. But again, just a lack of forethought and investment. Until recently, the city, again, thankfully, there'll be a new recreation center, which I'll get to in a minute because that's on the next slide. But the city has bought some land on Maybank that can for future park use. So they started to invest recently to kind of make up for this a little bit, but we have a lot of catching up to do. And again, when you compare it to the rest of Charleston, it's quite a stark difference. Look at the peninsula. And you can go to that website right there to see this data. Okay, this is park facilities. So this is where I got some good news coming. A very similar situation, a dearth of facilities. So what I mean by facilities is, swimming pools, baseball fields, things like that. Thankfully, Mayor Cogswell, well, first of all, back up. Thanks to the 2023 City Council, 2022, 2023 City Council, who put in a referendum for the voters to vote for millage increase for Parks and Recreation, and the voters passed that overwhelmingly. So there's projects all around Charleston that's going to fund on James Island, West Ashley, Peninsula, Johns Island, Daniel Island, I think. but Mayor Cogswell chose Johns Island and West Ashley as the first two places to focus on first. And they're being planned right now. We got a design team, we got a construction managers picked for a brand new recreation center and the only recreation center on Johns Island. And hopefully that will start in the next and be done hopefully in the next 2 to 3 years maximum. We'll have a pool and we'll have a lot of other stuff. We're planning it now. We're going to get public input, but that's really exciting. So that's the good news. But again, bad news is this has not been invested in early enough or often enough. And we're playing catch up. And I believe our current city administration is doing what it needs to do to catch up, but it's going to take some time. But again, this adds to traffic because people who, would kids that would go swimming at a pool on Johns Island but can't and have to drive to West Ashley, or the parents have to drive them to West Ashley or James Island, or other activities that don't exist on Johns Island, um, adds to traffic. So trying to get amenities that people want and businesses that people want to go to as much as possible on Johns Island is a way to combat that, and we're working on it. So that's it for part two. So part one, I talked about who your representatives are at all government levels and who owns our roads. It's very important. And on part one and part two, I just talked about development population growth. You got the data now to understand how much it's grown and where it's grown, and a little bit why and how that impacts things, and how it impacts infrastructure and the lack of infrastructure, or how it stresses the infrastructure. And part three will be some ideas on how we can better synchronize growth and infrastructure on Johns and James Island, or District 3 in general, or in our area, and Sea Islands as a whole. So there'll be a link to part three. So click on that, and I hope you got a lot out of this, and we'll share it with some folks that might be interested. And I'll see you soon. Thanks.